This tutorial will show you how to make a circle graph dynamic so that you can use slider bars to change values in the graph rather than manipulating the data by manually entering values. You'll be able to create a graph that looks and behaves like this one. In this example, we will use the idea of constructing a budget so you can change your budget to suit your needs. The result will be similar to this graph. Notice how the slider affect both the values in the table as well as the appearance of the graph. This tutorial assumes you already know how to create formulas in Excel as well as creating charts and graphs. It is created using the Windows 7 operating system with Microsoft Excel 2010. To begin, set up an Excel spreadsheet as you normally would. In this spreadsheet, data is entered for various monthly expenses. In this example, the first column contains the labels for the graph. The third column contains the actual expenses. The second column contains the percentages of the monthly expenses. The values in the leftover row is the amount of money left after the rest of the expenses have been subtracted from the monthly income, so it is dependent upon the other values in that column. The monthly income has been set to $5,000. The values in the second column depend on the values in the first and the third, as they reflect the percent of the monthly income for each category. The values in the first two columns are used to create the graph. To begin, in order to add controls, you will need to add the Developer tab to the ribbon if it is not already activated. To add the Developer tab, go to File, then go to Options, then click on Customize Ribbon, and check the box next to Developer. Notice that a new tab, after clicking OK, has been added to the ribbon. In this example, we will be adding a form control called a scroll bar. To add in a scroll bar, go to the Developer tab, go to Insert, then under the Form Control, select the scroll bar option. Notice your cursor will change to a crosshair where you can draw a rectangular shape that will contain the scroll bar. Click and drag across the screen to add the scroll bar. Resize the height of the cells and the size of the scroll bar as needed to fit the scroll bar on your screen. In this example, the height of the rows has been set to 30. Right-clicking on the scroll bar and then left-clicking on it provides access to its resizing handles. Before we go on to formatting the control, first take a look at the behavior of a scroll bar that has already been created to view its functionality. It has a minimum value by sliding the scroll bar clear to the left. It has a maximum value by sliding the scroll bar furthest to the right. Notice I can change the values in the cell two ways, either by clicking on the left and the right arrows, or by clicking on either side of the slider. When I click on the arrows, that is called an incremental change. And when I click on either side of the slider, that is called a page change. All of these values can be controlled. So now let's edit these values so that the scroll bar edits the value in the cell you want it to control. Right-click on the scroll bar to see its menu options. Choose Format Control. There are a number of values which can be changed. The current value will be the value currently displayed in the cell. The minimum value is the smallest value that the cell can contain. Likewise, the maximum value is the largest value that cell can contain. The incremental change, as discussed earlier, will be how the value in the cell changes when the arrows are clicked, whereas the page change will be how the value in the cell changes when clicking to the left side or the right side of the slider in the scroll bar. The maximum value should be set at a reasonable maximum value for each expense. Set the minimum value to be 0. Since this is electricity, I'll set the maximum value to be 500. Note that Excel does not permit negative values in a slider, though it is possible to use a proxy cell value in formula manipulation to create a negative cell value using a slider, but that is beyond the scope of this tutorial. Set the incremental change to be 10 and the page change to be 20. The last value in the control is the cell link. This is the value that links the cell to the slider. Click on the cell link input box, then click on the cell you wish for it to control, in this case C3. Now the slider will control the value you want it to. Click OK. As noted earlier, the slider can be moved and resized by right-clicking on it and then left-clicking on it. Click off the slider to make the control handles disappear. By right-clicking on the slider, copy, then paste to create the other sliders. These sliders will have the same dimensions as your original slider. Go to Format Control to change the values that control this new slider. In this case, the minimum value should be 0. Since it's gas, I will keep the maximum value 500, incremental change at 10, page change at 20. The cell link needs to be changed, however. In this case, gas is in cell C4. Here is the final graph. Notice how changing the sliders manipulates the values in the cell that it is linked to, as well as dynamically changing the graph. Now you can play around with the values in the table and the graph without manually typing in values. This procedure can be used for any table or graph type. The other form controls work similarly. Play around with them to see what they can do and how they control values in a cell to create more dynamic control of your spreadsheets and your graphs.